From more possible head men's basketball coaching options to Ellis and Sydney Curry's in-season progressions, and finally Hailey Van Lith's big night at Clemson. There's a lot to talk about on this episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Let's get right on into it.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credential media member for Cardinal Sports Zone, and I also do some PA announce work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time to personally thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. From the head basketball coaching search continuing, we will talk about two more possible candidates. That is LSU's Will Wade and Steve Forbes from Wake Forest. We'll then transition into Ellis and Sydney Curry's in-season progressions. And then finally, we'll finish the show with Hailey Van Lith's big night at Clemson and the Louisville women's basketball team continuing to do well in ACC play. Starting out with the coaching search, not necessarily a ton of new developments to talk about. We're still kind of in the wait-and-see approach. Not many candidates have been talked about as serious in general outside of really Kenny Payne. And let me make this perfectly clear, because I had a fan base on the last video that I put out on YouTube get really upset because I basically talked about their head coach in this respective search. Unless I come out and say that, hey, look, this guy's a serious candidate. He's probably, in talks with the university, like Kenny Payne, like we've done with Kenny Payne the past couple episodes, then 9 times out of 10, chances are the only reason I'm talking about them is to, do the due diligence and go over, all aspects of this coaching search, talk about all of the candidates that have been initially mentioned, initially linked to the position, whether or not they've been talked about recently or not. If you've been paying attention to the show, a lot of the candidates that I've talked about, it's really just a matter of determining, A, are they a good, option for the university to roll with, and B, is it even a feasible option that they could end up in the true search, so to speak. But right now, interim athletic director Josh Hurd is not tipping his hand either way. There has been no developments about who's leading the charge right now in terms of front runners. It would be, it is presumed to probably be Kenny Payne. But at this point in time, there hasn't really been a lot of names outside of Bruce Pearl been mentioned, but Bruce Pearl obviously is, on the lifetime contract extension with Auburn. So I want to continue talking about the search. We'll talk about LSU's Will Wade, Wake Forest's Steve Forbes today. I want to begin with the former Will Wade. Let's call a spade here. This is probably one of those cases to where I don't see Louisville going with Will Wade here, strictly due to the fact of, the ongoing NCAA investigation into alleged recruiting violations. Obviously, with Louisville in the respective state that they are in, it probably wouldn't be the best decision to go with a guy who is, in active investigations over some things that are in the same, in the same ballpark as to why you're in trouble in the first place. So from a PR perspective, it probably wouldn't be the right hire. And, who knows, Louisville might not necessarily even be considering Wade because of that. But for this situation, for this podcast, we're going to dive into the hypothetical. Now, obviously, keep note, I'm not saying that he is an option. I'm saying hypothetically, if for some reason Louisville was to be interested, if the interest is reciprocated, if Will Wade is truly interested in the job, and this isn't just an agent's ploy to try to get more money for Wade from LSU, let's talk about, would he be a good candidate or not? Number one, Will Wade, one thing that is attractive about hiring Wade, if, like I said, hypothetically, if things were to be mutual from the interest aspect of things, Will Wade is 39 years old. So having a younger coach that offers some stability throughout the next 10, 20 seasons, that's, pretty solid. Something that, we've kind of argued against for some coaches that have been brought up in this same search. From a basketball perspective, I will say that from talking to some LSU fans, some of my friends that are LSU fans, I think the biggest gripe with Wade right now is the half-court offense. Kind of one of those things to where the team, shows a lot of toughness. Will Wade is a player's coach. Players want to play for him. He's a guy that, has a ton of energy. His players play with a ton of passion and energy on both sides of the court. Very solid defensively. He's, very, good with recruiting. Now, whether or not that is due to, violations or, whether or not he's just that good of a recruiter, I'm not going to speculate as to what's going to happen with him, in the whole, the IARP saga and stuff like that. But with the with all of the attention on him these past 2 recruiting cycles, he's recruited very well. LSU has been better than they have been in quite some time. They have made NCAA tournaments. Overall, Will Wade as a head coach, he started out really young at Chattanooga, didn't make the NCAA tournament either time. Gets to VCU, makes the NCAA tournament twice, then comes to Louisiana State, goes 18-15 his first year. Makes the NCAA tournament the next season. They are the regular season champion in the SEC at 2018-19. COVID took away the possibility of making another tournament. They went to the tournament this past season, and then they are 16-6 and right back into the thick of things. So overall, I think Will Wade is one of those things that if he were to get hired at Louisville, I think a lot of the fan base would be uneasy considering the quote, the alleged baggage that comes with Wade and, all of the NCAA stuff. But ultimately, flipping the argument on his head, would he be interested in Louisville now? Arguably, I believe Louisville is a better job than LSU. That should not really surprise anyone. The Cardinals are a top 5 to 8 job in college basketball. You would assume if Louisville comes calling with the alleged interest from Wade that he would listen, and there could be serious legs if Louisville has a ton of interest. In terms of a money thing, I believe he's making about $2.5 million right now, which Louisville could definitely match. They could, raise that if they so choose. But let me make one thing clear. Scott Woodward, the athletic director at LSU, is one of the most respected in the business. He's a big game type of guy. Looking at the hires that he's made, Jay Johnson from Arizona to be, the Tigers baseball coach. He hired Kim Mulkey from Baylor to be the women's basketball coach. Brian Kelly, he took away from Notre Dame to be the football coach. So he is a guy that, when he sets his mind to things, he has a lot of backing, with the athletic fund, with the boosters, with the university and stuff like that. So you would assume that anything that Louisville offered within reason that LSU would be able to match. And, if it's strictly from a money thing, I think that LSU would feel comfortable with matching anything unless Louisville just threw the kitchen sink at him and threw him an offer that was outlandish. But I don't necessarily see that happening. And then there comes the fact that I think that facilities is a big thing as well. Some of my LSU friends have not necessarily been pleased with the Pete Maravich Assembly Center. There has been, I guess, rumored talks of there being either renovation or a new stadium being built. I don't know. I'm not saying that I know anything about that, but from a facility perspective, the Yum Center and the PMAC, not necessarily on the same playing field at all. So I think that if Will Wade were to be interested and the Louisville was to reach out, things could move quickly. Louisville could have their next head basketball coach. But ultimately, I don't necessarily think that Will Wade is a serious candidate. He's a good coach. I do think that, he would bring success to Louisville. He would bring a certain swagger to the program. But unfortunately, I think that with everything going on with the NCAA cloud, both at Louisville and at LSU, this is just one of those things to where it just doesn't make any sense for Louisville to really pursue. So ultimately, Will Wade really on the outside looking in, and I have to question whether or not he is a candidate at all in the Louisville coaching search. Moving forward on the Wake Forest side of things with Steve Forbes. Steve Forbes is in a little bit of a different boat than Will Wade. I'm a little older. I believe he's 56 years old. He's coached. He was an assistant coach at Tennessee under Bruce Pearl. When the Volunteers were very good, he was assistant under Greg Marshall at Wichita State when they had Fred Van Vliet and Ron Baker, winning a ton of games there. He ends up going to I think it was a Division II school or JUCO down in Florida, and ended up winning like 62 games and losing 6. He gets the East Tennessee State position. He comes in, wins a ton of games in the 5 years with the Buccaneer program, makes the NCAA tournament. I think did he make it? I think he made it once, but they only had double digits 2 seasons, and then at Wake Forest these past 2 years, he was 6-16 the first year, the COVID year, and then now he has the Demon Deacons rolling at 18-5. They're a projected NCAA tournament team from turning a bottom feeder ACC team into a team that is in NCAA tournament contention. I'm going to go ahead and put it out there. I really, really like Steve Forbes. I think he is one of the best coaches in the ACC. I think in terms of this whole coaching search, he is pound for pound one of the best X's and O's coach. He's been a guy that has not shied away from adapting to playing styles and adapting to the style of a respective squad in any given year. One thing that kind of unlocked his team's offenses is the 5-out motion basketball, which really emphasizes a ton of movement, a ton of ball movement as well, movement without the ball. And it's something that's utilized a lot in the NBA, like with the Denver Nuggets, with the Milwaukee Bucks. And I think overall, offensively speaking, you're seeing that with Wake Forest right now. He's a guy that wins games. He is a brilliant basketball mind. He is the only question surrounding Steve Forbes is whether or not he would be a good recruiter at Louisville. It's yet to be seen whether or not he's going to be a good recruiter at Wake Forest. It's easier said than done trying to recruit players to play at Wake Forest. No disrespect to the Demon Deacons, but if you're not at a blue blood, sometimes it can be challenging to have very, very good recruiting classes. But ultimately, I really like Steve Forbes. I think that if Louisville were to be interested in Steve Forbes, also would have some interest that this could move quickly as well. I think if Louisville came calling, Steve Forbes would listen to Louisville's pitch. I think that Louisville is a better job than Wake Forest. That really shouldn't necessarily be a controversial statement at all by any stretch of the imagination. But ultimately, he's one of those guys that got mentioned a couple times at the very beginning. Hasn't necessarily been a ton of traction after that, or at least to our knowledge. I think at the end of the day, both of these guys are just kind of one of those names that they sound good on paper, but might not necessarily get even an interview in this process, especially not Will Wade with what he has going on. But ultimately, I think both would succeed here at Louisville. I would feel more comfortable. He doesn't have the NCAA possible baggage, and obviously, it's alleged recruiting violation. So we're not going to go ahead and say that Will Wade, is, one of those coaches that partakes in that, because it still is under investigation. But I definitely would love to see Steve Forbes here at Louisville. Ultimately, I'm not necessarily sure how serious of a candidate he is. So I want to take this time now to transition back into the men's basketball side of things. We're going to talk about Ellis and Sydney Curry's in-season progressions and why I feel very good about them moving into the setting next season. Before we do that, I want to talk about our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline has had you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march to the playoffs, right to the big game in a couple weeks. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just football. BetOnline has up to the minute info on pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live real-time updates on current games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is where the game starts. Hey, Cardinal fans, this is your host, Dalton Pence, with another incredible app everyone who buys gas needs to know about, GetUpside. My listeners are earning cash back for every gallon of gas. Every time they fill up, just download the free GetUpside app in the App Store or Google Play right now. Use the promo code SCORE for up to 25 cents per gallon or more on your first fill-up, cash back. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Get cash back using GetUpside. Those that drive a lot are making as much as $200 to $300 a year in cash back, and there's no catch. The cash back gets added right back to your account. You can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon or Google Play, or Amazon or other brands. Just download the free GetUpside app on the App Store or Google Play. There we go. There's the Google Play insertion. And use the promo code SCORE to get 25 cents per gallon or more cash back on your first tank. Thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. It's Super Week, brought to you by GetUpside, and there's no better place to get coverage of the big game than the Locked On NFL podcast. Locked On Bengals and Locked On Rams are in LA all week covering the big game. Transitioning over into the men's basketball side of things on this year's team, respectively, I want to talk about the notable in-season progressions for both Ellis and Sydney Curry. Now, look, at the beginning of the year, I think both guys, it took them some time to get acclimated with not only this roster, with this, with the rotation, with the coaching, but also, just with the overall speed of, high Division I level basketball. Both guys are playing their best. They're playing their best at this respective part in the season. We'll start talking about Ellis. Right now, he's averaging 8.5 a game, 1.7 rebounds per game, 1.5 assists. He's shooting the ball 41% from the field. That's something that needs to improve his overall efficiency, but he's shooting the ball very well, 39% from deep. Overall, he's playing about 18.7 minutes per game. So, in terms of the production column, he's really making the most out of his opportunities. The past 2 games, he's played his best basketball here as a Louisville Cardinal against Duke and North Carolina. In the past 2 games, averaging 21.5 points per game. In that game against Duke, he had 18 and 2 assists, and against North Carolina, 25 points, 2 assists, 2 rebounds, 1 steal. And in that second half, he really caught fire. He hit 5 threes in the second half, brought the Cardinals back, tied the game up, got them, going back and forth with the Tar Heels, hit some big shots down the stretch. Look, I'm going to be honest. I think he's the best. Let me put it this way. I think he's the best athlete on the team. And overall, I think he's the most talented on the team. Ellis is one of those guys I've seen all over Twitter. People say, "Oh, it's like sophomore year Russ Smith." I like that, credit to that comparison, because I do like that. When I was talking about, Ellis and, what he reminded me of coming into college, it was Russ Smith, a guy that, was a polished scorer, had some athleticism, but also had an underrated ability to facilitate the basketball and find his teammates. He's starting to see a little bit more, ball handling responsibility. I like, when the ball's in his hands, because I think that the offense reaps the benefits of that. Ultimately, like I said, I think a lot of it's, getting more comfortable with, the players around him, getting more comfortable with the speed. But you've seen in the past couple weeks in ACC play and in the big games this season, I think that's very encouraging, is the fact that Ellis is showing up in the big games. He looked good, on the road at East Lansing against Michigan State. He's really been, coming into his own, shooting the ball well from deep. I think overall finishing at the rim needs to get a little bit better, but I really like what I'm seeing from Ellis. I was on record saying before the season I could see him being a double-digit scorer. Right now he's sitting at 8.5 points per game and under 20 minutes of action on a nightly basis. That's going to continue to be, to jump up in terms of overall production and stuff like that. I think that Ellis should be a starter alongside Sydney Curry. Sydney Curry, on the other hand, it took a little longer for him to, make his overall, impact on the roster. I think that there was a little bit more of a, log jam in the front court, so to speak. I mean, they had Malik Williams, they had Jalen Withers, and, Rose Wheeler and company. But overall, it's an interesting thing, because, with Jalen Withers struggling, Malik Williams being out a couple games here and there, Sydney Curry's only playing about just over 10 minutes a game. Now, a lot of that's skewed based upon what we saw from, in early season, when there'd be games where he, didn't play a single minute and stuff like that. But overall, now he's playing a lot more in the past 5 games. Trying to find where that is. There we go. The past 5 games, North Carolina, he played 17 minutes. Duke, he played 15. Virginia, he only played 9. But the 3 before that, 13, 24, 25. He's played in double-digit minutes in the past 7 of the last 8 games. Had 22 points, 10 rebounds against NC State. He's a player that needs to get more minutes. Had 10 points, 2 blocks, 6 rebounds against North Carolina, 8 points and a rebound against Duke. He's another guy that is starting to play his best basketball in the current sense. 75% from the field, so he's been crazy efficient overall, I think that he's one of those, diamond in the rough type guys that needs to get more minutes because I think that, the sustainability is there. I think that with him playing more minutes, we're going to obviously see an uptick in production. It's not going to be one of those things to where when he gets more minutes, the production kind of plateaus. I think it's going to be a linear thing to where you're going to see him, give you a lot more on both ends of the court. I love the fact that he's getting more and more comfortable with this overall team and, just the style of play. He's being relied upon a lot for his defense in the post and overall just the offense. Good Lord. I don't know if you can hear that sound, but someone's running the vacuum upstairs, so it sounds like the floor above me is about to collapse. But overall, I really love what I'm seeing from both of these guys. I think that overall going into next season, assuming that both of them stay with the program, I mean, you're talking about possible all-ACC team recognition. And, overall, I think that both these guys will be two that need to start. I think that Sydney Curry has shown, he can be effective at both the 4 and the 5, which is something that, the concerns kind of came about with him being a bigger guy. Can he play the 4 next to Malik Williams? Well, obviously, it should really be the other way around. Can Malik Williams play at the 4 next to Sydney Curry? I think that with Malik Williams suspended again against Syracuse coming up tomorrow, that Sydney Curry is in line for some big time minutes. So I'm really excited about both of these guys. I think that we're seeing them play their best basketball. Two of the most talented guys on the team, guys that play with a ton of passion, with a ton of heart, that play for the jersey or play for the name on the front of their jersey, and I'm very excited. Two fan favorites for the University of Louisville. I want to finish out the show talking about the women's basketball side of things. Hailey Van Lith had her best game as a Cardinal. We'll talk about that here in just a second as we talk about our friends at Built Bar. It's the new year, so that means New Year's resolutions. If yours was about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure to include Built Bar in that plan to sustain that journey. It's the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. It makes it easier to stick to that resolution because it tastes so good, you'll want to eat it. Unlike other protein bars, which can be chalky, waxy, or even taste like a chemical spill, so to speak. Look, I know sometimes you want to eat healthy. Sometimes it gets boring. By like week 3 or even, now in early February, you're thinking maybe this resolution is just not for me. I'll try again in 2023. Well, you're asking, where's the chocolate? Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. They have a lot of the healthy benefits on top of being purely delicious. So do yourself a favor. Go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Once again, that's use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Final segment of this episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast dedicated to the women's basketball team. The number 4 Cardinals went on the road to South Carolina to take on the Clemson Tigers on Thursday evening. They handled the Tigers in a very easy manner. 93-71, allowed more points than we're used to seeing this Cardinal team give up, but they also were 7 points short of the century mark. The big storyline of the night, sophomore sensation Hailey Van Lith had her best game as a Cardinal. 34 points, 3 assists, 2 steals, 3 rebounds. She was 13 of 16 from the field, 100% from behind the arc, 6 for 6. And that just kind of goes to show you, look, I get it. Hailey Van Lith came into the program, this very popular figure, this very popular figure in women's basketball recruiting and stuff like that. And, one of the players that kind of went viral because of, her ability to play like James Harden, so to speak, step backs and crossovers and all this other flashy stuff. But what kind of gets lost in the sauce in a lot of times is sometimes people expect too much coming out of the gate. Hailey Van Lith played very solid her freshman season. She did not have a bad freshman season, so to speak. Had to play behind Dana Evans and stuff like that. Year 2, struggled shooting the ball starting out. She's gained her footing, recently in ACC play at the end of a non-conference slate. She's starting to put it together now. We're starting to see that player that, a lot of people thought was coming in and going to show right away. It's just have patience. These players are here for 4 reasons for a reason. Credit to her for figuring things out. Credit to this coaching staff for putting her in the best situation to succeed. She is a high-level competitor on both ends and very unselfish type of player. So even if she's not scoring a ton, she's affecting the game in other ways. 34 points. I'm very happy for her. Hopefully this is going to spark a big run for her to where she's able to take over, because she absolutely took over against the Clemson Tigers in a way that I have not seen from her yet in a Cardinal uniform. It was by far her best performance for Jeff Wallace's team. Ultimately, I was extremely excited. I thought that she was getting whatever she wanted. Obviously, 13 to 16 from the field. They handled the Tigers very easily. Kiana Smith, that didn't necessarily shoot the ball well. She was a little off. 3 of 12 from the field, 1 for 7 from deep. Chelsea Hall, 2 for 6. Cochran and Inksler, both 6 and 10 points respectively. It was the bench that got. It's kind of where I see a lot of positives as well. Liz Dixon, 6 for 6 from the field, 12 points in 21 minutes played. I thought she played very well. I really love what I'm seeing from Peyton Verhulst lately. Only had 5 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists. But for me, 2 steals as well in only 15 minutes of action. She came in right away and got a foul call, got a steal, etc. Even though she's not necessarily scoring the ball at high levels, Jeff Wallace told me in an interview with Cardinal Sports Zone earlier, before the season, is she's not a player that does one thing great, but does a lot of things really good. And we're seeing that she's affecting the game in more ways than not. She's getting more comfortable, getting more acclimated with the speed of this level. And she just looks, she's internalizing it all, and she just, she's looking the part, so to speak, in terms of, a 5-star freshman coming in, and you're starting to see that with more and more each game, that skill level, match the confidence and stuff like that. So I think she's going to be a very big player for the Cards as the team gears up towards the postseason. Also, we saw some good minutes from Alana Smith. Mikasa Robinson looked very solid. So on and so forth. Got some minutes from Sydney Shetland, Romani Parker, Marissa Russell, etc. Overall, Cards shot the ball over 50% from the field. I think it was 50% from deep. So offensively, maybe the best outing of the season for the Louisville women's basketball team. Defensively, kind of left a couple of things to be desired, but ultimately, love what the Cards are seeing. The number 4 Cards and Jeff Walls are rolling to no one's surprise. So overall, we talked about Steve Forbes and Will Wade and whether or not they would be good candidates for the Louisville head coaching position. Talked about Ellis and Sydney Curry's in-season progression and Hailey Van Lith's big night at Clemson on Thursday evening. There will be a bonus episode that will either come out later tonight or sometime this weekend, talking about National Signing Day, Scott Satterfield's press conference in terms of takeaways, and a quick look at the secondary for next season. Before we get out of here, a couple quick shots. First, the Cardinal Sports Zone podcast. You can check that out at cardinalsportszone.com. Also, the Locked On Bets podcast hosted by your boy Q with handicapping expert analysis from Lee Sterling, where you can get that on the Odyssey app or wherever you like to get your podcasts. That's going to wrap up this week of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. Everyone have a great weekend. Stay safe. If you're in Louisville or a place where there's a ton of ice, please be safe on the roads. Stay warm. Everyone have a great weekend. And we will see you right back here on